Hello and welcome to a brand new Fast Talkers. What a week it's been in Formula One. It's been busier than a very busy thing, and I'm delighted to say I have three fabulous people alongside me to talk all things motorsport and F1, and there's plenty to talk about. So let's first of all go to Finland and say hello to Niki Juusela. Niki is a debutante on the programme, so delighted to have you. Niki is also one of the lead commentators at CMore. Niki, thanks for coming on the show. Those are some bright curtains and an even brighter jumper.
Yeah, exactly. I love these ugly Christmas sweaters, and even this got a bit of a Formula One theme. So I have these small lights, and so it's a lights out, and away we go to this program. So really happy to be here.
I'm already delighted that Niki has been able to join us. It's fantastic news. Right, let's go over to Hong Kong. Matthew Marsh, presenter for Fox Sport Asia. Where's your flashy jumper?
I'm afraid I don't have anything like what Niki displayed. I don't have any lights out, and away we go. The one thing I do have actually on my bookshelf, which I try and theme, I've got of course, and you'll know this, Jenny. This is, of course, Pedro Rodriguez, who was the last Mexican to win a Formula One Grand Prix. That's obviously not winning a Grand Prix, but that's 1970 at Brands Hatch. And I thought Joe Ramirez as another worthy Mexican to be on the bookshelf.
Ooh.
Loving that. That's great. Very themed, very nice. I feel like I should now organise my bookcase to reflect that, but I'm not going to. Finally, we have F1 TV commentator Diego Mejia in Madrid, but our Latin American specialist. Diego, lovely to have you on. What have you got behind you or on you that you can show and tell?
Oh, well, I can't beat Niki. I think nobody can. He's just a very tall order this day. But I have some lights, and I can switch between modes depending on who we want to talk about. And we can go a bit disco or whatever.
I feel like I need to up my game.
Boots from the past and Nico Rosberg helmet. Mini helmet.
Amazing. Amazing.
I didn't actually know that he did have such a small head, but I assume he did.
Oh, well, I hope he doesn't listen to us.
Nico, if you're listening now, move along.
That was not meant to be like that.
Oh, right. It was a very exciting race last time out in Bahrain. In fact, our whole journey to Bahrain seemed to be full of drama, intrigue, twists and turns. First of all, I want to know, Niki, were you as confused as it seemed like the rest of the commentary world were when Bottas was going pretty slowly? George Russell had the puncture, and everybody thought that, because it made sense, Bottas had a puncture, but actually George had the puncture.
Yeah, I was actually stunned, and I did this one interview, and after the race that where we kind of opened up our mixed feelings about the race, and it was the first time ever doing any sports commentating that I just had to one time I had to take the mics off, and I just looked at our expert commentators, Toni Vilander and Ossi Oikarinen, who's also been in the sport a long time, and we just kind of stare at each other at the maze at what's going on here, because we didn't understand what's going on and why he's lacking the speed. It wasn't a big surprise that Russell is a fast driver. We all knew it, and especially I pointed that out to experts that you have to watch out for Russell, that even though he's driving the first race, he's going to be mighty fast. But the biggest surprise was start isn't, in my opinion, isn't that big of an issue, because when you know that you've got a problem, you can fix it. But the race speed and the pace itself was a big surprise, but with both tires. And especially, again, the problem was that the longer the stint went on, the bigger the problems Bottas had. And that was the big problem again. And I was kind of in a bit of a shock, actually, that he's in such a slump, and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be the first race that we've seen Bottas have a bad weekend. In fact, I think that's 3 in a row for him.
Yep.
Diego, what are you guys making of Bottas's form at the moment?
Well, I think it's a difficult one in some ways, because you would have thought that Sakir would be the race that he'd just dominate the whole weekend. But he seemed a man, at least to me, a man under pressure from the very beginning of the weekend. The way he had to face some dodgy questions from the media on Thursday, some very punchy, as he described those, was, what everybody thought when they said, okay, so it's going to be Russell, and everybody said, well, what if he's quicker than Valtteri? And he seemed like he was from the very first practice session. The way Valtteri went on the track for his first quick laps on Friday was like, I'm here. He just put a time that was like kind of a banger lap. And then George started building up nicely and somewhat ended up being quicker than him. And after Bahrain's start, I think we expected second place to just slide back because there was no grip. But then first corner and George is ahead. So it's like the worst case scenario, I think, for Valtteri. And then he had, and I think he was unlucky again with everything that happened in the double stack and how he ended up with the wrong tires. He has had some bad luck, but on the other hand, I don't know how much mentally he has been affected by being so hardly beaten by Lewis every other weekend, even when sometimes he himself says in the press conference, I don't understand. I mean, how? And for a driver to not understand and not, I mean, be surprised that somebody went quicker than you went when you thought you did your 100% must be very hard to take.
Matthew, have you been surprised? Did you expect, I suppose, more of a competition between Bottas and George at the weekend?
I thought there were two factors. I thought on Friday it was easy to understand why Valtteri was not going so well, because he probably came in with an expectation based on having driven the car a week ago. He thought he knew how the car would behave, and I think probably the cars were set up differently because of the bumpy sector 2, and as a result of that, he was probably thrown a little bit, whereas George had essentially no expectations. The other side of the coin for me is that the guys who are mega, and I can't think of a better technical term than that, but the guys that are mega are just mega, and they are from the day they turn up. So George Russell turned up at Macau and was on the front row or pole, I think front row, but you know, as a rookie in Formula 3. And at Macau, which is obviously my local race, you know, the rookies turn up, they don't need a second season, all that nonsense about year 2. They just get in there and they win it, whether their name is Ayrton Senna or Michael Schumacher, or actually he won it only second year, but put that aside. But then George did the same thing in GP3, did the same thing in Formula 2, did the same thing when he arrived in Formula 1. So to me, it wasn't a surprise that he was going to be on the pace of the car. So I think to Diego and Niki's points earlier, I think it's more that Valtteri underperformed his potential than the other way around.
And I have to also point out that all the drivers, regarding who they are, it doesn't matter who, if it's even Pietro Fittipaldi or whatever, the 20 drivers that are on the grid, they are absolutely probably the greatest drivers in the world at the moment. So you have to also understand that the pace for every driver they're quite similar in the qualifying conditions, but the biggest point is the race pace, and that is the one that I'm most concerned regarding Valtteri. That even though he's always telling us, and everybody knows that he's using the phrase that we are learning all the time, and we have to learn about tires. It was 2017 that he came along to Mercedes, and they've still hasn't fixed the problems with the tires. That always with the stint, the longer it goes, the harder it gets with him with the tires, with the pace and everything. If Lewis Hamilton had been second in the Valtteri's position in Bahrain 2 in the second race, he would have closed the gap to 1.5 seconds prior the pit stop and done the overcut, and then just drove like 55s or 56 the lap times when Valtteri did 58s. And that is the point that Valtteri hasn't been able to do actually in all of his career at Merck. And that is the big problem with the pace. In the one lap, in the single lap in qualifying, he's got a great speed, and I wouldn't say that Russell would be even beating Lewis if they drove a similar kind of car in qualifying. You have to understand also that Lewis is the all-time greatest in many aspects. So the raw speed is there, but the real problem is with the tires, I think.
It's exactly the opposite problem, I suppose, from Sergio Perez, our race winner, who seems to be able to care and nurture and look after those tires like a newborn baby. It's incredible.
Yeah. He has this built-in traction control, especially at tracks like Bahrain, where you have to look after the rears, and he's been wonderful at that since his very first F1 race. A strategy sort of played a role in him finishing in the points after he got disqualified, and his teammate as well. But he built a reputation for that. And he came in the Pirelli era, and he's been very good in this kind of very difficult tire at some points. But yeah, I mean, he was amazing, and I think what we've seen from Sergio I think it has had to do with the situation he has suddenly faced. I mean, because when you look at his season, for Drive to Survive season 3 is just a perfect chapter. The history of fighting back. I mean, he comes in with a long-term contract. Everything's very happy. We're going to be a greater team in the future. All is good. My teammate is not really, he's going to learn this first year. Then maybe some challenges, but okay. But then he gets COVID. Then he misses 2 races. The start of the season had not been that great. Then between all these, there's talks with Vettel. He loses his seat. He doesn't have a seat for the next year. He's suddenly facing the end of his F1 career. And then he starts giving these great performances, like Turkey was great, I think. And then he wins the race. I mean, you can't come up with this. And it's great. I mean, and will there be a happy ending with him getting that seat? I don't know, but he certainly, I mean, I think he certainly has done everything within his power to earn it.
I was thinking about a few things. Under the heading of the megas, we love Valtteri, by the way, great guy, and we want him to have success because he's a nice guy. And that's not always the case in sport, is it? Sometimes we have to put up with people winning who we don't enjoy talking to. Valtteri is not that. Valtteri is absolutely the kind of guy you want to see winning. But was he ever a mega? By which I mean, I know he won GP3 title. He didn't win in Formula 3, and he wasn't up against, I don't think he was up against mega guys that year. He's very quick in qualifying, but is he a mega? That's what I'm asking. On the head, but Sergio, again, great guy, impressive, no doubt a good Formula 1 driver. Was he a mega? I'm not sure. And so that, and I'm leading all this to the Alex Albon situation, which is, again, great guy. And I spoke to the guy he ran with, Mick Bartlett, I think it is, who he ran with in karting, who said when he saw him, he knew he was special. But again, his results in the junior formula, he never actually won a championship, did he? A significant one in Formula 3 or Formula 2. I just wonder whether that's the tiny difference, because it is often, isn't it?
I have to totally agree with you, Matthew, because, the raw talents that we talk about, just like you said, Russell, Verstappen, Leclerc, the guys who have won everything and who just kind of, they just stands out from everybody else. And Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, those are the shining diamonds that lead the whole sport. And I have to agree that Valtteri is of course they're all talented, but I have to agree, he's not mega. Otherwise, in 4 years' time in Formula 1 with Mercedes-Benz, he would have been in much more closer fight about the World Championship with Lewis and everything. And one thing about nice guys, that is one of my favorite subjects in sports, all the sports. Usually the winners are kind of assholes, I have to say. That has to be the case, especially the winter sports that have been Finn. We follow, the skiers, the most successful skiers, ski jumpers, even ice hockey players. The winners and the best athletes are usually a bit of dickheads because, sorry for my language, excuse my French, but that is the case because you have to be kind of self-conscious and know what you want and just kind of just go for it and not be any polite or that is usually the case. And same thing has to be said about motorsport also. If you think about winners, they have always been kind of controversial. Ayrton Senna wasn't a nice guy. Michael Schumacher, he did have, a few of issues and controversial cases. Alain Prost was a nice guy, but still, there was a dark side of that. He was really, really focused and just wanted to win. And all of the winners they are, you know what I'm talking about.
I think what you're saying there is that if the nice guys aren't going to win, things are looking really good for Nikita Mazepin next year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's going to be a 7-time, 8-time world champion. Yeah.
Well, to that point, the other day I was watching a documentary about coaches, and there was a very nice segment with Jose Mourinho, and he was saying, like, you don't win big things with nice guys. I don't know if you guys remember that British Grand Prix where the Williams started better than the Mercedes on the front row, and suddenly Valtteri was leading the race. And I think Felipe was starting to put the pressure on him, and he was told to let him by. And he somewhat said, but then in the end, he did, And that I think is a little bit of what's lacking on Valtteri. I mean, that killer instinct, that like selfishness from the greats.
We're not saying for a second that Lewis Hamilton or Michael Schumacher in this are not nice guys. Of course they're nice guys. I'm sure they do. They're great with their families and friends. They're great with charities and all the things they do. We've heard stories. We know they do that. So it's not that. It's a nice guy, therefore, isn't the right. We need to come up with a better phrase. So, for example, you see it in Lewis Hamilton in the rain against Nico Rosberg at Monaco. You know, Nico just looked very second rate, didn't he? And Lewis just had that belief. He woke up that morning, looked out, and it was the sun wasn't shining. It was raining. And he thought, brilliant, I've got this race. Because he knew in those situations, he would have the belief, right? I think Nico had that, you know, that streak in him for sure, because he couldn't have beaten Lewis otherwise. He had that streak. So I don't think it's about being a nice guy. I think it's something, it's more on the dark side than the lack of bright side.
And about Nico, I have to say that he's such an intelligent guy also, that he had the means to turn it around, to find that extra spark in 2016. And that made the difference. You know, the guy speaks anyways 5 languages or 6 languages, and he's really, really intelligent guy. So he was able to do all the right stuff and to dig a little bit deeper to find the whole psychological thing to turn it around. You know, even in the flyaway races, he turned the clock around, or, you know, did every single thing that he could have done, and that just made it. And that are the measures that would take Valtteri to beat also Lewis, and to find that extra. I don't think there's not going to be anyone who's able to, or Valtteri isn't going to be able to find it and turn it around.
Talking about, sorry, Matt, nice guys, because I wanted to ask you, because I mentioned Drive to Survive before, and you will remember the first season and the episode where Checo is not really portrayed as a nice guy, you know? So in a matter of a couple of years, I think the overall perception of him has completely turned upside down. Like, he was the bad guy. He was getting into the way of a young, talented, upcoming driver like Ocon. He had the money to carry on, whereas Ocon didn't. But then he's now in a completely opposite situation. Like, yeah, man, the guys who own the team, they just want somebody else in Checo's seat. He's doing the best of his career, but then he doesn't have a seat, and everybody loves him and everybody wants him to carry on in Formula One. So I think it's also a matter of perception and how things play in your career at different points.
See, this is the problem when you try and eat at the same time as do a show.
Yeah.
It goes terribly wrong, and Matthew Marsh is going to have to now take a pause. He's choking.
Just being caught out. Lucky I'm
Are you
right
all right?
on television.
Matthew?
I hope it's not my comment.
Joke on it.
If we think Valtteri is not one of the megas, no disrespect, and George only just beat him and was actually beaten by him in qualifying, then how good is Lewis Hamilton? Or is he that good? Because he's only just been beating Valtteri.
That is a good question. And even if you think about Nico Rosberg, there was pretty much, they both won equally much. Of course, Lewis was a little bit on top of winning side, but still they were pretty close. And after Valtteri, it's like slumped, and Lewis has won the most of the races. So that is a good question. That it would be lovely to see George Russell driving alongside Lewis Hamilton. How quick Lewis would be then.
Do you think it's a case that drivers spur each other on? So, of course, we have this situation with, let's say, Stroll and Perez. They are both come from very rich backgrounds. They both have a lot of money behind them, but one of them has a race seat for next year and the other one doesn't. But they're spurring each other on to be better. And you look at those partnerships and rivalries. Bottas isn't spurring Lewis on. Lewis knows he's got the better of him, but put someone like George in there, and surely Lewis's game will undoubtedly rise to where the potential and the highest peak, rather than he's doing enough to win at the moment, and easily.
Are we going to see George in the car instead of Valtteri next year? That's the question, isn't it? We're all thinking it. It's the elephant in the room.
I think bringing George in will be a little bit like, I mean, it's not exactly the same situation, but it's like when Lewis arrived in Alonso at McLaren, you know, it's like this young upcoming guy that, I mean, probably nobody is expecting him to beat the current world champion in the same team, but eventually he does at some point, and that starts getting into the other guys' psyche. This is not only about talent, about experience, but it's also a mental game in many ways, and especially when you can see what the other guy is doing because you're in the same team, and suddenly you realize that this guy is coming up with things that you didn't think were possible, or you didn't see a way in which that would work, like a bit with what happened with Leclerc and Vettel. For the sport, for the good of the sport, I think, and because I think we will see another year of domination from Mercedes, it would be nice to have something different in there that can spice things up.
When it comes to Bottas, do you think he is on borrowed time at Mercedes? I mean, they're surely going to have to find a way to part company with Bottas amicably before the end of next year.
If he gets to keep his seat for next year, winning the World Championship title would save his Formula 1 career. That is the overall mood in Finland. Somebody even said quite grimly that was the funeral of Bottas' career, the last race, which is pretty dark to say, but anyways, it didn't look good. And if we think about the 3 races that's gone really bad, the only way to save his career is to win like all the races in the beginning of the season and just to assure everyone that he's still capable of winning the races and being fast as hell. But that's, everybody knows that it's really difficult task for him. And I even made the comparison about Austin Powers, who lost his mojo back in the day, and somebody came from the and stole his mojo. And I think the same happened with Valtteri, that somebody just took his mojo, and he's lost all the confidence, and and even when we think about Valtteri 2.0 or whatever, and he's cursing in the team radio, and now if you look back at those kind of small things that he did, and I don't feel that comfortable, listening back of those tapes and what he did, and try to upgrade his bad boy image to the extent that Kimi's done it or whatever. You have to be confident. You have to find yourself, and if you're a nice guy, be a nice guy, but don't overlay everything that you're not. Just don't add extra to what you aren't. And to Valtteri to find his inner mojo and confident, that is the only way that he's gonna ever survive in Formula 1 from now on.
What can Valtteri do? I mean, if he was to lose his seat at Mercedes, there's basically no seats available. I mean, we know contracts these days can rapidly become just a piece of paper you can throw in the trash and change it or whatever. But yeah, I think it didn't look great on him what happened on Sunday, and I think overall during the whole weekend, besides him getting the pole and showing he was the faster guy of the two, but yeah, I mean. It's put Toto Wolff and Mercedes in a very difficult situation because also if you look at the numbers, I mean, Valtteri is not as well paid as Lewis, but I think George would raise for a fraction of what Valtteri is earning. I don't know.
Formula 1 has a problem, and it tries to contain costs, and I think in the wrong areas. So, for example, there's the reason we have a problem with drivers at the moment. We don't have the 20 best drivers. One of the reasons is that we don't have any testing. And so there's no opportunity for a team to discover that a driver is as good as he could be. And for a driver, by the way, to polish up his skills. I mean, it does take time. And so it does mean that we end up with Kimi racing into his 60s or whatever it is. And because the test isn't a guy who's regularly every week going 0.7 of a second faster. And the same thing with George. If George had been testing for Williams in the background, I know there's not that much time these days with so many races, but if that had been happening, they would know by now, and we would know that maybe it's just that he turned up in Bahrain, and because he didn't have to think about it too much, if you know what I mean, he didn't have too much expectation, he drove with a lightness, and we know that's always the best way. We see the best from Lewis in those occasions, and maybe if he does hopefully get to race this weekend in Abu Dhabi, he'll overthink it, George, and he won't be as fast as Valtteri, and we'll have to come back next week and say we're sorry.
Yeah, you think so? Really, that's going to happen in Abu Dhabi if it's the case that he will drive?
I don't think it at all, because I think he's mega, and I think he'll just get even faster. But I'm just saying that it's not right that when the teams are spending so much money every year, that we end up not getting the best drivers in the seats, because if they don't get their one crack, then, and it shouldn't be that difficult. You know, we keep talking about 2-day weekends. Well, let's make Friday a day when the driver on a Friday has to be in his first year in Formula One or less. So it can be a guy who won Formula 2 the year before, then you've suddenly got a reason for F1 teams to hire these people. Or if it's Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, fine, they can do the whole season on Friday.
Or
But
Fernando Alonso.
Or well, that's a whole nother topic.
Oh, yeah. Young, talented Spanish guy. I've never heard of him.
He's going to be very good, I think. Great. Look, we're going to run out of time. So I want to find out from you. We haven't even spoken that much really about Perez and Albon and potential moves. So we thought there were only really 2 seats left in Formula One. That would be the AlphaTauri seat, which looks like it's going to go to Yuki Tsunoda.
Woo! He's one of my favorites. He's one of my favorites.
Mine.
Yeah, I've also done commentating Formula 2, and I just love the guy.
Yeah, he's a really, really impressive talent. Let's hope he can transfer from Formula 2 to Formula 1 without too much problems. So let's call that a done deal and say that the only seat is the Red Bull seat of Alexander Albon. Now, I'm going to start with you, Matthew, because obviously you're representing Asia here. Has Albon done enough to keep his seat, or is he going to be sidelined for next year, and are they going to put Perez in instead?
Logic dictates that he hasn't done enough, and that's quite clear, I'm afraid. No need to go into the details of that. They're obvious to anybody who's been watching. But there's something going on, isn't there? Because the sort of, either they're keeping it a very good secret, and I'd love to hear my colleagues' take on this, or they're not going to take Sergio for next year. Remarkable if Alex goes into another year. I'd love to see him in Formula One, but you know, the reality is he's not doing a good enough job. So if he does, then what is it? What's the reason? I don't understand it.
It's not been what we were expecting to see from Alex this year. After this has actually been his first full season with Red Bull, and he just came in Formula One last year from nothing. From suddenly being facing a season of Formula E, he jumped ship to a race with Toro Rosso, then switch in the middle of the season. And actually I remember, because then things start coming to your mind, his first race with Red Bull at Spa, his big battle was with Perez, that Perez almost put him on the grass on the camel straight, and then they had to meet at the stewards room, and a few months after they're fighting for the same seat at Red Bull. He hasn't improved, especially in qualifying at the rate you would expect, and Red Bull is a one-man team at this moment in terms of fighting at the front. It's Max only, and Alex hasn't been that guy supporting the team to get the most out of what they have and pushing probably Max to a new level. He's very comfortably well ahead of him every weekend, and the gaps haven't decreased. I think the gap in terms of time was similar in Sakir, but when you think that this track is probably 1.5-2 kilometers shorter than any other and has, I guess, the fewest corners of all, he should have been much, much, much closer, and he wasn't. So I think there's probably many reasons that we will never understand or learn about. I think there may be some political, commercial things in the background that are giving him the chance that Pierre Gasly never had, because the way this has come out publicly is totally different to what Pierre had to face. I mean, he was put under pressure on the media. He was told he was going to stay. Christian Horner told the French TV that he was going to stay, and then a few weeks later he wasn't, and that was his career at Red Bull without being given, a full season, especially when you have Max on the other side of the box. So, I don't think he has done enough. But on the other hand, I mean, what would you expect if Checo comes in and be on the other seat beside Max? I don't think it's an easy one for Checo either. But when you were probably out of Formula One altogether, I mean, what the hell? I just go for it, In
my opinion, nobody would beat Max Verstappen in similar cars. I think he's the fastest driver in the grid at the moment. But the consistency it is what Checo would bring to the Red Bull. Not seeing the races that he's been 8th or 9th or even qualifying 12th and then have to pick it up from there. But I would say that he would bring the consistency to Red Bull to fight for the places in top 4 and really also to give a little bit pressure on the tactical side to Mercedes, who always have had the races like 2 against 1 in a sense, and that's going to end up the Mercedes winning the race. But the question that I want to ask also from Matthew, that you're following the sport from Asia, is how big of a deal is it that Alex is driving with the Thai license? Is it a big factor also, because we all know what's behind the Red Bull and Matasic and such?
2 answers to your question. Commercially speaking, and generally, there's not that much excitement around him racing, you know, in Asia or in Thailand. From my experience of going there and talking to brands about coming into the sport, I didn't get my hand bitten off, sadly, disappointingly, but not surprisingly. Whether the fact that Red Bull is 51% Thai owned and the CEO, you know, has obviously helped Alex in the past, whether that is in some way a factor, I don't know. And if it is, I mean, what I wanted to just quickly say at the end of this really is, because I never like being critical of Alex. I think he's a great young man and a very good racing driver, is I hold Red Bull absolutely to account. They've been absolutely shocking in the way they've managed drivers and
exactly.
treated them over the last several years. And I was aware of what was going on. They only showed interest in Alex after he'd signed for Nissan in Formula E. And that is, to me, that shows, again, talking about psychopaths, that's something very strange in the behavior of Dr. Marco to do that, when he was very well aware of Alex before that. And you've seen the way they treated other drivers. And I don't understand why he does it. And to put Alex into a Formula 1 car without any testing before the season test is ridiculous. And so what do you expect? They get what they're reaping what they've sown, really.
Well, that's all we've got time for.
No, we're just getting started.
I know. I mean, we're all good at talkers. We could keep
you can go, we'll carry on.
Yeah, I'll just leave you to chat amongst yourselves. That's fine. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure to hear from you. And what I'll finish on very quickly, and I only want 1 word answer from you. Bear that in mind. I know this is hard for you guys, but 1 word. Who will be in the Red Bull second seat next season? Let's go Matthew first, then Diego, then Niki.
I'm going to say Nico Hülkenberg.
Throw it all out the window. I love it. Diego?
Well, I'll have to go with Checo. Since the very beginning, I've said it's the unlikeliest of options from what he had when he was told he was not carrying on.
This is not 1 word. I'm just going to say, this is not 1 word.
Yeah. And then my 1 word is Checo.
Fine. Good. Niki?
Wishful thinking.
Albon.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it. That is your Fast Talkers. It's been brilliant. Thank you guys so much. I'll leave the room. You can carry on chatting. Have a Merry Christmas, and let's see what happens next year.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Merry Christmas, everyone.